Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin daf Lamed Zayin. It's the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is sponsored by Lori Shulden Ashore with gratitude for having reached this day as I turn 67. May I be privileged to turn 68 1 year from now on the eve of completing the 7.5-year Daf Yomi cycle. Kol hakavod to all of my teachers and fellow learners for our shared engagement in Daf Yomi during these past 6.5 years. May we continue to have the strength and the zchut to go and learn. Happy birthday, and we are looking forward to seeing you on your 68th birthday next year, June 7th, 2027. Okay, with that, we're going to get started with our daf. We're starting with the Mishnah at the top of Daf Lamed Zayin. We're going to talk about something called a misukenet. A misukenet, as opposed to a treifa, which treifa has certain specific defects or issues, but a misukenet is an animal that's about to die, but doesn't have particular signs that fall into the categories of the 18 treifot that we've been learning about. So if somebody slaughters a misukenet, Rabbi Shimon, now the issue is, if you slaughter a misukenet, it's actually permitted to eat the animal. If it's a kosher slaughter, it's not considered a treifa, even though the animal was ready to die. So the question is, what indicators? Now, if the animal was dead before the shechita, obviously you can't eat it. It's an avela. So how do you know when to draw the line? Whether the animal was dead before the shechita or not. So we're going to have a three-way machloket between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer, and the rabbis. Hashochet et misukenet. So if you slaughter an animal that's about to die, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer, ad shetefarkes biyad uberegel. Once, if it still flails both its hands and its legs, remember front legs and back legs, then it has to be still flailing its hands and legs. Rabbi Eliezer omer, daya im zinka. It's enough if just the animal spurt out a lot of blood. What happens when the animal gets slaughtered is the animal kind of coughs up or breathes out lots of blood in a big spurt. That's enough to show the animal still has the energy to do that. It still has life in it. Within Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to have Rabbi Shimon. Amar Rabbi Shimon, hashochet balayla ulamachar yishkim. If you slaughter the animal at night and then the next day you get up in the morning, umatzak talim. Now remember, in those days at night you couldn't see things. There was very poor lighting, right? Candle here and there, but you couldn't really see. Umatzak talim le'im dam. If you found the walls full of blood, kshera shezinka uchemidat Rabbi Eliezer. He says you know it's kshera because it must have spurted blood. And this is according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that spurting blood would be enough. So if you see blood all over the walls, you know that the animal spurted out the blood. The Chachamim omrim. Now we're back to opinion number 3. Okay, we had either flailing hands and legs. We had spurting out blood. Third opinion, ad shetefarkes o biyad o beregel. Spurting blood either by hand, or either the hands or the legs. You don't need both. Or even if it wags its tail, that is sufficient. So the rabbis need the least, right? It goes from most to a little less and even less than that. This is applicable to large animals, small animals, all the same. Except that a be'emah dakah that puts out its hand and doesn't bring it back, okay, so biyad or beregel is enough, okay, according to the rabbis, but in a small animal, just moving the hand forward but not backward wouldn't count as an indicator of life, because that's what they do when they die. They die and the hand goes out, and therefore that's not a good enough sign. She'ena ela hotza'at nefesh bilvad. That's the soul leaving the body, okay, or the life force of the animal leaving the body, and that's where the hand goes and flails. But now this whole Mishnah is only, by the way, that we knew it was sick to begin with. But a perfectly healthy animal, even if it doesn't have any of these signs at all, it's going to be kshera. Okay, it doesn't need to have any signs for there to be an issue here. Okay, if you're not concerned that the animal died before, then we don't think the animal dies before you finish the slaughtering of it. Now the Gemara starts off, and we're going to basically deal with one main question today, or except for the end of class. But until we get toward the end, we're going to deal with one main question. Misukenet mimai desharia. How do we know that a misukenet is permitted? Okay, how do we know that if we slaughter an animal that's about to die, it's kosher? So the Gemara counter questions and says, Umimai tisakadati and da'asira. Well, why would we think it's forbidden? We don't see any pasuk that says, don't eat an animal that's a misukenet. So they say, no, there is one that references it. No, not really, but in the world of drasha, yes. Dichtiv, it says, Zot hachaya asher tochlu. This is when it's talking about kosher animals. These are the animals that you can eat. Now, the word chaya means animal, but it also means alive. Okay, so what are they going to darshan? Chaya echol. If it's alive, eat it. V'she'ena chaya lo tochal. And if it's not alive, then don't eat it. V'ha mesukenet ena chaya. And an animal that's about to die is not really considered a live animal. So that would be the reason to think that maybe an animal that's not fully alive, because it's about to die, wouldn't be allowed to be eaten. Now, just to point out, and I'm pointing this out specifically because we're going to talk about this in a little while, there's no lo taseh here. It never says don't eat it. It just says this is the animal you should eat. So if we would say a mesukenet couldn't be eaten, which is what the Gemara is suggesting, then it would only be what you call a bitul aseh. You wouldn't be fulfilling a positive commandment of eating only an animal that was alive, but you would be doing something wrong, but it wouldn't be transgressing a negative prohibition. Okay, so you wouldn't get lashes for it, let's say. But it still wouldn't be permitted, where we know it's permitted. Okay, so now what we got to so far, we asked a question. How do we know it's permitted? We said, why do we even think it's asur? We said, well, maybe because of this pasuk. And now we're going to have to prove, how do we know it's permitted? And that's going to take us most of the daf. We're going to have 5 different answers to this question. The first 2 we're going to reject. The next 3 are going to be possible answers. So the first answer is, Mid'amar Rachmana, Nevela lo tochal, Michla de mesukenet sharia. The Torah says don't eat a nevela. Now, a nevela is an animal. There's a few possibilities for a nevela. A nevela is an animal that just dropped dead. Okay, a nevela could also be an animal that wasn't slaughtered properly. Okay, either you messed up the slaughter, or you choked the animal, or you chopped it in half, lengthwise or something like that, and didn't slaughter it. So it says nevela lo tochal. Now, what they're assuming right now is that nevela includes one of those possibilities, which is an animal that just dies on its own. Now, an animal that dies on its own usually is a mesukenet before they die on its own. So imagine the timeline. We have a healthy animal becomes sick or close to dying, and then the animal dies. Now, if we tell you, don't eat it at the last stage, right? Let's call it stage 3, okay? Stage 1, alive. Stage 2, gets sick and almost dying. Mesukenet. Stage 3 is dead. If it says, nevela lo tochal, don't eat it when it's dead, well, from there you can infer that until that point you can't eat it, which is even when it's mesukenet. That's what it means, michlal. From there you can infer, it says don't eat a nevela, then mesukenet is permitted. Because if you thought that mesukenet was forbidden, once it's already forbidden in its lifetime, because we learned zot hachayat has to be really alive and this animal's no longer alive at stage 2, then I don't need to tell you, I have to tell you also stage 3, don't eat it. If already I couldn't eat it at stage 2, of course I can't eat it at stage 3. To which the Gemara rejects this and says, what do you mean? V'dilma, hainu nevela, hainu mesukenet. What do you mean? Maybe nevela and mesukenet are the same things. Meaning when it says don't eat a nevela, it includes or an animal that's about to die. Okay. That's a possible reason to say this is not a good proof. But the Gemara says, what do you mean? Lo salkadatach, there's no way that you could say nevela includes mesukenet, right, about to die, because dichtiv, ki yamut mina be'ema asher hi lachem le'ochla, hanugea b'nivlata yitma erev. Okay, that's a pasuk about a nevela, which talks about the impurity about a nevela, but it says, when the animal dies, right? So what do you see here? La'achar mita hu dekari rachmana nevela. Once it's dead, it says ki yamut. Not mechayim lo ikre nevela, but it's not a nevela when it's still alive. So back to saying we don't really have a good reason to say, right, this is basically the proof that if nevela doesn't include a mesukenet must be permitted. But the Gemara is going to still reject this because it's going to say, v'dilma lo'olam emalach, hainu nevela, hainu mesukenet. Maybe you could say that nevela is mesukenet. And therefore, what's that pasuk adding? If it already says, right, zot hachaya, and this is the one you can eat, and you can't eat a mesukenet, then why does it add, and when the animal dies, you can't eat it? Well, mechayim ba'aseh la'achar mita belav. You would say like this, when it's still alive and about to die, it's what I said before. You're transgressing a positive commandment. You're just not keeping the commandment of eat animals that are still alive, and you ate something that wasn't. but you didn't transgress a negative commandment, you wouldn't get lashes. Once it actually dies, then you're going to get lashes. And then we could actually say that the Mesukenet learned from that pasuk, the Nevela is from this pasuk. They're teaching you that now you have a lo taseh if it's already dead. And it still means, though, according to this, you actually can't eat a Mesukenet. So it's not really permitted. Okay? And therefore, this is a bad proof. Second attempt. Ela mida amarachmana treifa lo tochal, michlal de Mesukenet sharia. The pasuk says, don't eat a treifa. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing, basically. If you can't eat a treifa, well, from there you can infer that a Mesukenet you could eat. Why? What's the connection between a treifa and a Mesukenet? Right? Both are animals that are actually going to die within a certain time frame. Well, Mesukenet lo machasra, de'isal kadatach, Mesukenet asira. If you think a Mesukenet is forbidden, hashta Mesukenet lo machasra asira, treifa mebaya. Now here it's not exactly a timeline, but it's in terms of stringency. What's worse? An animal that's going to die but has no specific simanim of being a treifa, or an animal that has certain physical signs that are indicators that they're going to die within 12 months, right? They're missing a leg, one of those treifa signs. Hole in the lung, right? So, if this is the case, then we're going to say like this. If the Mesukenet is not missing anything, and yet is forbidden from the Zot HaChaya pasuk, then obviously treifa, when it says don't eat a treifa, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. It's obvious that that would be the case. Vidilma, they say, what do you mean? Hainu treifa, hainu Mesukenet. Now they're going to do the same thing they did with nevela and say, what do you mean? Maybe treifa and nevela are this. A treifa and Mesukenet are really included in the pasuk of a treifa is also a Mesukenet. V'lavor alav ba'aseh v'lo taseh. And what's the extra pasuk telling you? It's telling you if you eat a Mesukenet, you have two prohibitions. One is treifa, don't eat. That's a negative, and you're going to get lashes. And you've also violated a positive commandment of not keeping the Zot HaChaya pasuk. Im kain, wait a minute. But then something doesn't make sense. Because im kain, nevela dekata rachman alamali. Well, then what do you need the nevela pasuk for? Because you already know that there, in the previous section, what we say you need the nevela pasuk, because nevela actually you get lashes for it. You don't get lashes if it's just a Mesukenet. Now that we say you're going to get lashes, if it's a Mesukenet already because of the treifa pasuk, then you really don't need the pasuk about nevela. Because again, you can just infer it very clearly. If when it's alive, you transgress, right? When it's about to die, you transgress, number one, the positive of Zot HaChaya, and the negative of don't eat a treifa, because that includes a Mesukenet. Then what do we need the pasuk about the nevela for? Completely unnecessary. To which they say, no, maybe Dilma Hainu Nevela Hainu Treifa Hainu Mesukenet. Maybe we'll say someone who ate a nevela actually ate all three things because they transgressed Mesukenet, right? It was Mesukenet before it died. Then that also includes the negative of the treifa. And now that it actually died and you ate it, it's now a nevela. And now you're going to have two negative prohibitions, which means you're going to get two sets of lashes, and you haven't done this positive commandment. So that doesn't work. Because in the end, we tried to say we learned it from the treifa pasuk, and then we said maybe the treifa pasuk includes the Mesukenet, and then, right, and then theoretically, if it actually died on its own, you'd end up with two lo tases and an aseh, and you could read it that way. So there's no proof here that it's actually permitted. So out goes answer number 2. Answer number 3. Elame'ata v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa yaseh l'chom alacha v'achol lo tochlu. Let's try to understand this pasuk first. What is chelev? It's forbidden fats. You can't eat fats of any animal. So this is a bit of a strange pasuk. It says the chelev of a nevela, or the chelev of a treifa, which anyway the meat's forbidden. And anyway the chelev is forbidden if it wasn't a treifa or a nevela. But they're telling you the chelev of this treifa meat or nevela meat, right? If you kill the animal, right, some other way, didn't slaughter it, or the animal was a treifa, that chelev cannot be eaten. Okay, now the chelev of any animal can't be eaten, and it also tells you, by the way, yaseh l'chom alacha. You can actually use it. It doesn't carry the impurity of, normally nevela has impurity, but the chelev of a nevela doesn't carry impurity, only the meat of a nevela. Okay, so let's try to understand what they're going to do with this pasuk. So it says 2 things. Doesn't become impure. Number 2, don't eat it. V'amar mar, now it was said about this line, this pasuk, l'mai hilchata. Okay, what's this for? what are we bringing this pasuk for? Because obviously you can't eat chaylev anyway. Why are we telling you can't eat chaylev of a treifa and a nevela? Amrat Torah, yavo isur nevela v'yachul al isur chaylev, yavo isur treifa v'yachul al isur chaylev. What's it telling you? That even though it's already chaylev and you can't eat it anyway, the fact that it's a nevela, if you ate the chaylev of a nevela, you'd be transgressing two things, just like we saw in the previous section. Okay, so far we don't know the connection. So you can't eat chaylev of a treifa, you'll have two sets of lashes. You can't eat chaylev of a treifa and a nevela. Each one, if you did it, you're going to get two sets of lashes. Turning now to Amud Bet. Ve'isal kadat treifa hainu mesukenet. Now, if you say a treifa is a mesukenet, lichtov rachmana, then it would have been much smarter if a treifa includes mesukenet, and mesukenet is forbidden. It should have said, chaylev nevela yaseh l'chom alacha, v'chaylev treifa lo tochluhu. Okay, let's just, you don't yet see where they're going, or maybe you do, but let's start explaining, and then we'll read the next line. Really, the big chiddush of the nevela is that it doesn't become impure. So it should have split the sentence in two. It should have said the chaylev of a nevela doesn't carry impurity, like the nevela usually does, but the chaylev of it won't. And the chaylev of a treifa don't eat. Now, why would they do this? Because number one, the treifa, we don't care about impurity. It's not going to be impure anyway. And the nevela, we don't care about not eating. Why? Because let's think about it. If misukenet is also a treifa, right? Then you already know that a misukenet you can't eat, because chaylev treifa, you can't eat the chaylev of a treifa, or you can't eat the chaylev of a misukenet, an animal that's about to die. And if you do, you're going to be liable for two things, right? For the fact that you ate a misukenet and an animal that was about to die, and the fact that you ate the chaylev of it. Okay, so it's because it's chaylev. You ate the chaylev, so two things in that one eating of the chaylev. And then what would you say? Just like we said previously, va'ana amina, and then you could easily infer that ma mechayim ati isur treifa chayali isur chaylev, since when it's still alive, the isur treifa, which is because of the mesukenet, it's about to die, is chal, even it takes effect even on the chaylev. La'achar mita mebaya, do you even need to say it after death? In other words, of course after death. It's going to be, once it dies, the nevela is going to be forbidden to eat, because even when it's still alive and about to die, it's forbidden to eat. Because remember, that's stage 2, and the nevela, the dead, is stage 3. So if you're chayav in stage 2 for eating, you're obviously going to be chayav in stage 3 for eating the chaylev of this animal. So therefore, it wouldn't need to say anything about chaylev nevela, don't eat. Ela midakat rachmana nevela. So therefore, the fact that it says nevela, michlal de treifa lav hainu mesukenet. From there, you can obviously infer that a treifa is not a mesukenet, because otherwise there would be no point to say chaylev nevela, lo tochal, right? Okay. And we're going to have a difficulty on this, but we are going to resolve this difficulty and be left that this is actually a possible way to learn it. Matkifla mar baravashi v'dilma la'olam. Maybe you could go back to saying a treifa does include mesukenet and it's forbidden to eat. And if you want to say, why did it then say nevela? Well, lahach nevela de lo acha mikoach mesukenet. Going back to what I said previously, maybe the nevela here is coming to talk about a nevela that didn't go through stage 2 to get to stage 3. It didn't get sick first and then die. How did it become a nevela? Hechidami, what would be the case? Shasa agistra, that I just chop the animal straight down the middle. There's nevelas that are initiated by humans, and the animal wasn't sick before it died. So, that case, you would need the pasuk of a chaylev nevela. It's still going to be called a nevela, and the chaylev, you're going to be transgressing 2 prohibitions. You ate chaylev number 1, and you ate from a nevela number 2. So, that would basically explain that you really could say treifas mesukenet and still need that pasuk. But the Gemara rejects this answer, or responds and resolves this answer, because hatam nami ifshar de lo havi mesukenet porta mikame de lifsok leruba. So when you're cutting up an animal, so basically you're going to end up first having it become a mesukenet before it dies. It still has this teeny stage where it's between being a mesukenet and dying. Okay? And therefore, even when you chop it in half, it's still going to have that stage of mesukenet before, and then it's really not necessary. V'i bait ema, or alternatively, you could say, Im kain lemakra chelev nevela utrefa. Chelev lamali. Okay, now here, that's it. That's the answer to that question. So we resolve the difficulty and we end up with, this is answer number 3. Okay, so answer number 3 actually isn't rejected in the end because the chelev nevela is really unnecessary. And it must be coming to teach you if the mesukenet was included in treifa. So it must be the mesukenet's not included in treifa, and that's why it's telling you don't eat the chelev of a nevela. You're going to get 2 sets of lashes. Now we're going to have ibai dema, a 4th answer. In kain lemakra chelev nevela utreifa. This is going to be from the same pasuk, but in a different way. It could have just said chelev nevela and treifa. Why does it have to say chelev nevela, chelev treifa? Why did it repeat the word chelev twice? It would have been obvious. Chelev nevela and treifa, and it would mean obviously the chelev of a treifa. Chelev lamali. Why do you need the word to be repeated a second time? Zohi she'en chalba chaluk mibsara, v'yesh acheret shechalba chaluk mibsara, ve'ezozo misukenet. Okay, they're going to say it like this. The extra word chelev is to tell you there's this chelev treifa. The chelev is just like the meat. The meat is forbidden, the chelev is forbidden. But chelev treifa, specifically this kind of chelev of treifa, is like that. But there's another type, there's another type, which is similar, and yet the chalba chaluk mibsara, but the chelev is different from the meat. What case would that be? First of all, that's the case of any meat, really, that the chelev is different from the meat. But we're trying to find something that's similar to treifa, and yet the chelev is distinct, which it would be a case of a misukenet, where the meat would be permitted and the chelev would be forbidden. And then, right, ezozo, that's the misukenet, and there's a drasha to basically say, it's clear from here that they're trying to tell you the misukenet is permitted. Now, it's a bit of a jump, because it's a bit of a drasha there, but Ibai dema, you have to remember, they obviously know that a mesukenet is permitted, and they're just trying to find some sort of source for it in the Torah. The Ibai dema mihachli, 5th option. This is going to be a pasuk from Yechezkel, Ezekiel. Va'omar, and I said, Aha Hashem Elokim, hine nafshi lo metuma. Okay, Yechezkel is going to make a list of things that Yechezkel said, look, God, I was extra careful about all these things, much more so than everybody else, and not because they do terrible things, because I held myself to a higher standard than everybody else. So nafshi lo metuma'ah, I never became impure. We're going to have to see what this means. Nevela utrefa lo achalti minu urai va'adata. I never ate nevela utrefa all of my life until now. And lo ba befi basar pigul, and I never ate basar pigul. Okay. So other than the first one, which, okay, people become impure, although he is a Kohen. So he's saying, I'm a Kohen, I never became impure. But we're going to darshan all these things to be talking about something a little bit different. And now pigul sounds like everyone can eat pigul. You get curry for it. And everyone can eat nevela and treifa. So why is Yechezkel saying I'm special because I did these things? So we're now going to have to explain them all in a bit of a different manner to understand what these things are and what standard Yechezkel held himself to that other people don't have to. Hine nafshi lo metuma'ah. So the first phrase teaches you shelo hirharti bayom lavoli de tum'ah balayla. I didn't have thoughts during the day that caused me to have seminal emissions at night, which would make me impure. So that, other people might have thoughts, might have seminal emissions, but never happened to him ever. Shelo hirharti unevela utrefa lo achalti minu orai. Haven't eaten nevela utrefa since my youth. Shelo achalti basar kos meolam. What did he never eat? Meat that you say, slaughter now, slaughter now. That's kos is slaughter. What does that mean? What kind of meat do you say, slaughter now, slaughter now? Meat that's an animal that's about to die. Because if you let it die on its own, it'll be an avela. But if you see it starting to die, so the first thing you do is slaughter it immediately. We've talked about this before, right? Generally, you want your animals to use them for working, for whatever it might be. But once they're about to die, you want to slaughter them before they become nevelas, and then there's nothing you can do with them other than, sell the meat to somebody. But you can't eat it yourself. So what do you see here? This is the obvious proof, although we'll see it inside in a minute, but it's pretty clear. He says, I never ate this, but other people eat it, okay, which means it's permitted. Okay, next, lo bifi basar pigul. I never ate pigul meat. Pigul meat, if you remember, is when someone in the temple has a thought that they're going to eat the meat beyond this designated time, or right, depending on there's all sort of circumstances. Anyway, what does it mean here? It doesn't really mean pigul in the sense of the real pigul. I never ate from an animal that the rabbis paskined about, meaning someone had a doubt about the kashrut, and the rabbi said it was okay, but I stayed away from that. Mishum Rabbi Natan Amru, here's a different interpretation of that. The animals have parts that you're supposed to give to the Kohen. Now, he was a Kohen himself, so he didn't really need to give the parts to the Kohen, but he would still anyway, and he wouldn't eat from meat that they hadn't given the parts to the Kohen. Okay? So anyway, what do you see here? He was very careful about all sorts of things, and if it was permitted to eat this meat that was mesukenet, then we understand what was unique about what Yechezkel did. But if it was forbidden, what exactly is Yechezkel teaching us? Okay, and with that we end the sugya. So 5 answers to the question, why? How do we know if mesukenet is permitted? The first 2 were rejected, the second 3 were accepted. At this point, I'll kind of just redo the daf. We started with 3 and then summarize the daf, and then we'll just finish up at the end a very small section. But if you slaughter the mesukenet, just because we're still in it, right, you need these indicators that the animal is still alive. We have 3-way machlok at what indicators we need. If the animal's healthy, we don't need any indicator. Then we went to, how do we know mesukenet is permitted? First the Gemara said, why would you think it's aser? Then we explained from the pasuk, zot hachaya. From there you might think it's forbidden. Then we went to 5 explanations, either nevela lo tochal, because the stage before, right, is mesukenet, so why are you telling me don't eat there? But we rejected that. Second, treifa lo tochal, and then because if that's missing parts and this isn't missing anything, then obviously this should be permitted because only that's forbidden. But then, right, we said maybe not. Maybe each of these is adding another prohibition, right? But not that it's actually permitted to eat it. Then we went to chelim devei lechelim treifa yaseh lechom lechav achol lo tochlu. The fact that they word it this way and they don't word it otherwise seems to teach you that nevela can't be eaten, and if it's included in treifa, right, the mesukenet, then you wouldn't need another pasuk for nevela. We had a difficulty but resolved it. 4th answer, the repetition of the word chelev, which comes to the chelev of treifa, is just like it's meat, but there's some other meat that's not, and that would be the mesukenet. And the 5th answer being this pasuk of Yechezkel, he said, I didn't eat that meat that was mesukenet, but other people do, and it's permitted to them. Okay. Now we're just going to end with hechi adamya mesukenet. What exactly is a mesukenet? Okay, what stage shows that the animal is a mesukenet? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, kol shema'amidino tave'ena omedet. If you stand it up and it can't stand on its feet. Rav Chanina bar Shlemia mishmei de Rav. Now Rav Yehuda said that in the name of Rav. Rav Chanina came in and added to that and said, even, okay, in the name of Rav, he said, Rav also added, afilu ochelet bikiyot. Even if it can eat chips, like wood chips, where you see it's working to chew, it's still not an indicator. If it can't stand up, then it's a mesukenet. Okay? Now, Rami bar Yechezkel amar afilu ochelet korot. Even if it's eating big, huge chunks, okay, meaning it's still very alive and still eating them. As long as it can't stand up, it doesn't matter. It's considered a mesukenet at that point. We assume it's going to die. Besura matnu hachi. Okay, this was the version in Surah, but in Pumbedita matnu hachi, they had a bit of a different version. The main difference is that Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, what we saw Rav Chanina added. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Okay, even if it's right, if it can't stand, even if it's eating chips, okay, with these wood chips, meaning it has energy still, but it's still considered a mesukenet, it's going to die. Rami bar Yechezkel, as in the first version, Amar afilu ochelet korot. Even if it's eating big, thick beams, which obviously takes a lot more effort, we're still going to call it a mesukenet. Okay, again, as long as it can't stand up, it's a mesukenet. And with that, we finish. So those 2 versions weren't really different. It was just that the question is, did Rav Yehuda think that Rav said actually something else, right, without the even eating the bikiyot, or that was actually what Rav Yehuda said? Okay? And with that, we finish today's daf. With that, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.